So, hello guys. Now we are going to be performing our task 2. I mean my task 2, which is comparing two similarly uh, compatible processors, which is AMD Ryzen 5-3400G versus my processor, which is Intel Core i5-1135G7. So let's get to it. Starting with, yeah, that's by me. Starting with its specifications or description. So here are some specifications of a laptop, of a processor, I mean. Let's start with the AMD Ryzen 5, shall we? With microarchitecture of the AMD Ryzen 5 is Zen Plus. The core name is Picasso. Cores, it has 4. Threads, it has 8. The base clock has 3.7 gigahertz. The boost clock has 4.2 gigahertz. With having a cache memory of 4 MB, TDP of 65 watts, processor of 12 Newton meter FinFET, and the socket naming AM4. Next, let's go to my processor, which is the Intel Core i5. With microarchitecture of Willow Cove, core name of Tiger Lake UP3. With having a 4 core and an 8 threads. Base clock of 2.4 gigahertz, boost clock of 4.2 gigahertz, cache memory of 8 MB, which is higher than this, TDP of 28 watts, which is lower, process of 10 Newton meter, super thin, which is also lower, the socket of VGA1449. So, well, that's not the end. We have a part 2 of the specification comparison. We have here another specification. You can see. Now let's start again with the AMD Ryzen 5. And having a max memory capacity of 64 gigabytes. Memory type DDR4 2933. Max number of memory channel is 2. Max memory bandwidth is 43.71 GB per second. GPU integrated graphics is Radeon TM RX Vega 11 graphics. GPU base clock is 300 megahertz. GPU boost clock is 1400 megahertz. Having a max temperature of 95 degrees, and the market price is $439.98. So let's compare it to my processor. Max memory capacity of my processor is 64 GB, which is the same. Memory type is not. Mine having DDR4 3200 or LPDDR4X slash 4267. Max number of memory channel, they have the same, which is 2. Max memory bandwidth is 3200 megahertz. GPU integrated graphics is Intel Iris Xe Graphics G796EU. GPU base clock, which is slightly higher, 400 megahertz. GPU boost clock is lower, having 1300 megahertz. Max temperature having 5 degree higher, 100 degrees. And the market price is $342.50. So let's move on to its effective speed. As you can see, effective speed of the two, you can clearly see that the Ryzen 5 is leading in gaming with having 72%. like while Core i5 having 71. In desktop performance, Core i5 is leading with 79%, with Ryzen 5 only having 75%. In workstation, once again leading is Ryzen 5 with 63 and Core i5 having 60. Average and overclock score. As you can see, in memory, Ryzen 5 leads with a slightly lower memory latency. But in a single core mixed speed, Core i5 is faster by 23%. Same with the dual core, faster, 18%, with quad core 4% faster. But in octa-core, Ryzen 5 is faster by 11%. With overclock core, memory once again is Ryzen 5 is 2% percent higher. Single core is Core i5 again with 25% leading. Dual core is still i5, 24%, slightly faster. Quad core is also 9% higher. Then value and sentiments. As you can see, the Ryzen 5 is kind of constant. It's the value of market value is higher here, and it's slowly degenerating. And as we go to March 22. Meanwhile, our Core i5 is uh, is progressing rapidly here. It's higher and higher until it reaches 32. Value and sentiments having Core i5. Market share is usually higher market share, 105%. Ryzen 5 is much more popular. Nice to have is the age. Age is much more recent. That's the only uh, advantage to that. And the 64 core is also still goes to Ryzen, having 1% difference. The 64 multi-core mix speed is also Ryzen. Performance. Here we can see that the single core performance, the Ryzen, uh, you can see that the Core i5 is leading with 77 and the Ryzen with 61. Performance, measurable performance when cores are involved. Here we have leading Core i5 with only 1 point, we have 25, and Ryzen 5 has 24. Power efficiency is still Core i5 having 76 and Ryzen having 57. Ang overall nano review final score, generic GPU rating, ang Core i5 still the winner, having 58 and Ryzen having 53. Here we have next software benchmark. First, CPU-Z multi-thread single score. Here we can see that Ryzen is leading in multi-thread with 2,518, and while intercore has 2,489. But in single thread, Ryzen, I mean Intel Core has lead of 505 and Ryzen only having 461. We have next we have a benchmark of Cinebench, multi-thread and single thread, 873 in Intel Core, while in Ryzen we have only 752. A single thread score is 195 in Intel Core and 162. Meaning in Signbench, Intel Core is the winner in both both threads. Signbench 23, which is the same. Intel Core is clearly the winner. Yeah, there you can see. And pass mark, CPU mark, and single thread. As you can see here that the blue line, Ryzen 5 is the winner with having 9,338. Uh, having technical difficulty. So here we go. Uh, 38, while Intel Core is having 8,347 only. But in single thread, Intel Core has a slight advantage with Ryzen having 2,495, with Ryzen having 2,353 only. Geekbench, multi-core and single core, Windows 64-bit. Here as you can see, Intel Core is the winner in both multi-core and single core. Lastly, Geekbench for Linux 64-bit. And it's the same. Intel Core is the winner again here. The slight advantage here, only 41, I think. Yeah. Uh, Next we have the gaming benchmark. Intel Core i5, let's start with Intel Core i5. Fortnite with having 95.7, Valorant 108.7, Cyberpunk 2077 60.9, Apex Legends 102.2, Call of Duty Warzone 81.6, Overwatch 88.1, Red Dead Redemption 2 75.0, Doom Eternal 54.4, Warzone 84.8, Assassin's Creed 91.3, Valheim, yeah, I don't really play games, 90.3. With Ryzen 5, clearly, as you can see, having a low number than Core i5. Having 94.8 in Fortnite, Valorant 107.8, which is lower again, Cyberpunk 2077, which has 60.4, lower again, Apex Legends 101.3, and so core higher. Call of Duty Warzone 80.8, higher again. Overwatch 87.3, this is higher again. Red Dead Redemption 2 74.4, this is also higher. Doom Eternal 53.9, Warzone 84.1, higher. Assassin's Creed 90.5, and the Valheim 89.5. So we have here three questions. I'm gonna tackle first the first question of which among the two processors is more powerful in terms of raw computational ability and productivity tasks. Here I can say that here is Intel, 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 in Ryzen, Intel, Intel. As you can see here that we have the Intel Core has a higher productivity performance than the AMD Ryzen 5 according to the different benchmarks used here. Here is the Intel Core is the winner. Here not. Here the Intel Core is clearly the winner in both. Here is Intel Core again, the winner in both. Here and only this one. But here the Intel Core is clearly the winner. And here also clearly the winner. So next. Number 2, which among the two processors is more powerful in terms of overall gaming performance? So here, as I've mentioned before, I think Intel Core, no, I don't think. I know Intel Core has a higher gaming capacity than Ryzen 5. Oh, with all the data you've seen here, it's all, as you can see, Intel Core i5 is clearly the winner. It has higher points. Yeah, see there? And lastly, which among the two processor is more cost effective? As I've mentioned before, I think the most uh, cost effective is the Core i5, having a higher rank or rating or table than Ryzen. Ryzen is it goes up and it goes down again. Meanwhile, the Core i5 only goes up, slightly down here, but goes up. So I think that's it for, oh, in conclusion, we have here conclusion. In conclusion, we have both advantages of each processor, and first we're going to tackle the advantage of AMD Ryzen 5. So here's the question. Why is AMD Ryzen 5 3400G better than Intel Core i5-1135G7? 1.54x faster CPU speed. Ryzen 5 having 3.7 GHz, while Intel Core having only 2.4 GHz. Has an unlock multiplier. Yeah. 5.41% higher Cinebench R20 multi-result 1969 for Ryzen 5 and only 1868 for Intel Core i5. Supports ECC memory. 100 MHz faster GPU turbo speed. Ryzen having 1400 MHz, while Core i5 only having 1300 MHz. 13 higher clock multiplier. Ryzen having 37 and Core i5 having only 24. 0.2 newer version of OpenCL. Well, that is it for the advantage of Ryzen 5 to Intel Core i5. Next, we are going to tackle the advantage of Core i5 to Ryzen 5. So the question is, why is Intel Core i5-1135G7 better than AMD Ryzen 5 3400G? So here it is. 1334 MHz higher RAM speed. Intel Core i5 having 4267 MHz and Ryzen 5 having only 2933. 2 Newton meter smaller semiconductor size. With Core i5 having 10 and Ryzen 5 having 12. 3 MB bigger L2 cache. We're having 5 MB, the Ryzen 5 having 2 MB. 7.88% higher pass mark result. Uh, Core i5 having 10,130 and Ryzen 5 only having 9,390. 50-watt lower TDP with Core i5 having 15 and Ryzen 5 having 65. 4 megabyte bigger L3 cache. Intel Core 8 MB, Ryzen 5 4 MB. 5 degree 5 degrees Celsius higher maximum operating temperature. Intel Core having 100 and Ryzen having 95. And lastly, one newer version of PCI Express, PICIe, 4 in Core i5 and 3 in Ryzen 5. So, as conclusion, as you can see, performance, Intel Core i5 is the winner. In gaming also, Core i5 is the winner. In specifications, I can say that AMD Ryzen 5 is clearly the winner in specifications. It's clearly higher value than the Intel Core i5. And lastly, in market price, market value, I can only say that Intel Core i5 was the winner because of it is the more popular processor than the AMD Ryzen 5 because of the release date, which is the Ryzen 5 was first and this was second, which makes it more popular than the Ryzen 5. So that will be all about my report or my vlog, as you can say, about the two processors. That is all. Thank you.